Perhaps you have seen this quote that I want to start with. It was written by a psychologist who writes a lot. Her name is Heidi Phoebe. And she wrote a book called This Is Me Letting Go. But she also writes a blog. And this quote from her blog keeps circling on social media. And it floats around quite a bit. And I think it gets my attention because it rings so true for me. And maybe it will for you too. It says this, and it's too long to be on the slide. It says, "To love someone long term is to attend 1,000 funerals of the people they used to be. The people they're too exhausted to be any longer. The people they don't recognize inside themselves anymore. The people they grew out of. The people they never ended up growing into. We so badly want the people we love to get their spark back when it burns out, to become speedily found when they are lost. But it is not our job to hold anyone accountable to the people they used to be. It's our job to travel with them between each version and to honor what emerges along the way. And sometimes it will be an even more luminescent flame. Sometimes it will be a flicker that disappears and temporarily floods the room with a perfect and necessary darkness." I find that to be profoundly true because people are always changing. And when I say people, I mean you, and I mean me, actually. And I love that line. It's not our job to hold anyone accountable to the people they used to be. And I love that because it also means that we don't have to hold ourselves accountable to the people that we used to be. But I kind of find that hard, don't you? I find it hard to extend that grace to those around me. But I also find it hard to extend that grace to myself. I've been known to say that I don't owe anyone consistency, meaning that just because I did something this certain way, a year ago or yesterday doesn't mean that I'm always going to do it the same way again. Or if I reacted to something a year ago and you're expecting me to react in the same way I did before, I may not, because I may have changed since the last time I encountered that. And sometimes I get pushback on that. But what I mean is that I'm growing and changing, and so are you. And sometimes when we grow, we lose parts of ourselves that other people really, really like, or they're used to, right? And sometimes we develop parts of ourselves that other people have never seen in us. And we may seem foreign or different to them the next time they encounter us, and that's okay. That's okay. And we know that when we change, and we teach this around here a lot, when we change, the world around us changes too. And the question becomes, what direction are you moving in? Are you moving towards greater love and light? Are your responses becoming more self-loving? Are your choices moving you toward your highest and best? And if the answers are yes, keep moving and ask those around you to kind of follow Heidi's words and let them travel with you and honor what emerges. I was talking in class this week about allowing ourselves to heal and change, allowing that, to let go of things that make us feel shame, and let our vibrations rise as we do. Because when we let go of things that weigh us down, we do rise. And our theme this month has been rising higher. And today I'm encouraging you to keep rising higher, even when there is pressure to stay the same, even when others around you may not be rising at the same pace you are, and you seem to become unfamiliar to them and they to you. Even when you're scared about the changes happening around you and you just want to hold steady where you are. What I know deep in my heart is that some of you came to the center today to just feel connection and positivity, right? When I asked new visitors, and I know we have several today, when I asked them what were they looking for, I think I asked you this morning, what were you looking for online when you Googled and you found us? And they often say they're just looking for spirituality. They're looking for something positive, for some positive people to be around. And I hear that over and over. You gather here just to get love and light from each other, just to get hugs, and you soak it all up. And you take it with you when you go back into your kind of daily experiences, and you take that with you feeling a little bit more uplifted and encouraged than when you came in. Does that sound like any of y'all today? Right? I know that's certainly true for me, and I mentioned earlier that when I found spirituality, I needed spirituality. I was in a high-pressure job. I was a single mom. I was stressed out, and I was frustrated with so many aspects of what was going on around me at that time in my life. I was in the middle of so much life change, and if you know my story, you know some of that's true, and I needed some new wisdom in my life. I just knew that traditional religion just wasn't going to work for me. But maybe this spiritual center that people were talking about, maybe that would be where I could find something new for myself, some relief, right? And here I am, like 20 years later, and sometimes I'm telling you, I can't wait to get back here. I can't wait for Sunday morning or Wednesday night class or the next birthday lunch or whatever we've got going on here, because I get to be around all of you and feel these positive vibes that we create together. So what is that phenomenon about? What is that about? I think it's because our souls are longing to rise. And when we can be around people who are vibrating a little bit higher than the average bear out there on the street, we rise too. We rise. It's what we zipped into these magic suits to do, is to rise, to evolve, to grow. In this teaching, we teach that everything that's happening to us is happening on 3 planes. It's happening to us physically, what's going on logically in our lives. So that's the physical realm. But then it's also happening in the mental realm. We're thinking about everything that's going on. But we also emphasize that there's a spiritual truth underneath everything that's going on. So we have an experience in our bodies, but we also have it in our minds and our souls and our spirits. And we rise when we can shift away from looking at everything just logically to we rise when we can think about, okay, what are we thinking? How is our thought experiencing this? But then we rise even further when we can look at things from a spiritual perspective. When we can give our souls a shot at interpreting everything that's going on. That's one of the ways we rise, because life is constantly showing up for us as challenges and circumstances that we've got to transcend in order to stay positive and express our best self in the world. I don't know about you, but I'm running into a lot of things right now that I've got to transcend if I'm going to be my best self. And sometimes the challenges kind of pile on top of each other, and it gets very discouraging. And the question becomes, how do I rise out of that over and over again without getting overwhelmed? The answer for me is through rising through spiritual awareness. And I think that's what I'm here to do, is to help people rise up, to look at things from a spiritual perspective. Someone in class this week asked, how, Reverend Laine, how do I back up to a higher perspective when I've been so hurt and so discouraged? And my answer was, and still is, to turn to the truth and remember that you are a divine spiritual being first. That's who you are first. And your soul has never been hurt. Your soul has never been discouraged. That's all human stuff. Normal stuff, but not the deepest reality. Not the deepest reality. We are so much bigger than our life experiences. So much bigger. Ernest Holmes is the founder of this philosophy. He wrote a huge textbook. And one of the things he said in it was, spiritual existence is a fact. And spirituality may be defined as an atmosphere of good, the realization of God. So no wonder we're drawn to spirituality. If we're going to live from a higher perspective, we've got to become more and more aware of the good that's in every situation and realize that God is always in the situation that we're experiencing. And that is allowing our highest self, our souls, if you will, to interpret the situation that we're in. Have you ever heard the saying, take the best and leave the rest? Take the best and leave the rest. We transcend any experience by finding the best we can in it, pocketing that best stuff, and then step out of the ruins, step out of the rest of yesterday, of whatever happened, and leave it as you go onward and upward. But sometimes you got to sit in a situation for a while before you can figure out what you're going to take and what you're going to leave. I remember when I went through my corporate retirement about 7 years ago, I just needed some time to myself. My reality was I had worked for the same company for 25 years, and I had lots of different responsibilities, lots of different positions. I had bosses and team members and lots of experiences over those 25 years, and there were good times and there were hard times in my career, and it all ended up in an early retirement that I really wasn't expecting at that very moment. I didn't completely see it coming, especially with the timing it was. So my last day was on October 1st, and I knew that my next career step was going to be the assistant minister at the center like this in Atlanta. I knew that's what I was going to do, but I didn't want to start right away. I told their board president, I'm like, I'll do it, but I need some time. They were so excited that I got retired early, right? I'm like, I just need a minute. So I gave myself 3 months to do nothing. Well, actually, it wasn't nothing. I spent those 3 months trying to figure out what I wanted to pocket and treasure from those 25 years, but I wanted to face the future with that higher awareness and consciousness and take the wisdom that I had learned in my career into my next chapter as a minister. I wanted to take that with me. But that consciousness and that awareness took some time to find, right? So let's personalize this to you, okay? If you're going through an ending in your life, if something's changing right now for you, I invite you to ask yourself some questions. What were the best parts of the thing that is ending? What were the gifts this relationship or situation or job or whatever brought to my life? What were the gifts? What were the lessons that I learned here? Who did I meet that will continue on my journey with me as a result of this? And there are any number of questions you could ask, but the point is you're trying to identify the best of it. Take the best and leave the rest. Because once you've identified the best stuff, put that stuff in your pocket, put it in your journal, put it in your treasure box, and then leave the rest. It's so tempting to talk about all the reasons why you're leaving, all the reasons why you're glad they left, all the reasons you're glad the job ended or what you didn't like about the house or the city or whatever it is that's ending in your life. It's so tempting to talk about all of the stuff you're glad you're leaving behind, but leave it. Leave the rest. Take the best, leave the rest. As you rise in your life, you're always going to be rising out of things that no longer fit or serve you. You always will. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. The change might be challenging to get through, but something better is trying to come out in your experience. The key is to discipline your thoughts to leave the rest. So as you're clearing out the situation, you're naturally going to throw in the trash some things that didn't serve you, all the things you've outgrown. So don't let your mind cling to the garbage bag, right? Don't go digging through the dumpster with your thoughts or your words. Don't weigh yourself down with those heavy stuff. Take the best and leave the rest. Rise. And never, ever worry. This is an important point. Never worry that your time has been wasted or your effort has been for naught, or that anything had no purpose or no value to you. Our souls draw us to all kinds of situations to help us rise. And Ernest Holmes reminds us in the Science of Mind textbook this power for good uses every part of my human experience, every part, the joyous and the challenging, the pleasure and the pain. And it uses it to guide me into a deeper awareness and knowingness of itself as me. In God, nothing is wasted. All of my experiences are used by the power of good, enabling me to help others and to bless the whole world. Everything. Spirit uses everything to bless the world. Reverend Shell pointed out last week that she was talking about Rocky Road and ice cream, which I totally relate to, but she was talking about the bumps in the road are there to guide us to something greater. And I believe that too. The bumps in the road are there to redirect us. Instead of running from pain when it comes to visit, what if we leaned into it as a process of listening closely to hear what that pain has to teach us? What if we reframed pain as an expression of spirit, a holy portal that leads us to the center of our own unique power? What if that's the purpose of the pain? What if we simply trusted the rising process? The rising process. You know, when I use the word rise, my mind always goes to yeast and bread making, right? So you might have noticed on Facebook that Terry and I have been making pizza lately, right? So she's quite the cook. And she made a batch of dough, and I was watching her with the dough to make the crust, right? I'm not a baker. I don't get it too much. But at one point in the process, she had to pause for a little bit and let the dough rise. She knew that she just needed to let the yeast do its thing, right? She didn't need to help the yeast. She didn't need to question it. She didn't even need to understand what it was doing. She didn't need to wonder if the yeast was going to work, right? She trusted the natural process taking place on an unseen level inside that dough. And guess what? It rose, just like it was supposed to. And sometimes I've ever seen a baker punch it down and then put it back. I don't bake, but they're doing that to make the bread even lighter, right? It's easy to trust the law of nature when it comes to yeast. But we can also trust the spiritual laws too. We're invited to trust the yeast of the spiritual rising process. We're always rising, whether we can see or understand what's happening or not. We rise. We've got to have faith that everything is working out for our betterment and let ourselves rise. You know, our rising often turns out to be the way that we help others. Isn't that true? You know, once we've risen out of a situation, we're able to turn around and help someone else rise in the same way. Has that ever happened in your life? You know, sometimes when a person goes through a certain illness, they become advocates or sources of information for other people who are going through that same illness. Or sometimes when a person has, you know, conquered a habit or an addiction, what do? They turn around and they sponsor or help other people take that similar route to freedom. I know parents who've lost children who've started grief groups or for other families facing that same loss. It's part of our best nature to help others rise too. Spirit uses whatever yeast it can find in your life to help us rise. We simply have to have faith that we're rising. So to close out this monthly theme, this is the last Sunday of the month, of rising higher, I want to conclude with a poem by Maya Angelou called Still I Rise. I thought about reading only a portion of it, but I decided that her work deserved recognition of the complete poem. And this poem is so famous because it illustrates a universal truth. No one else can determine your worth or your value or your future. You determine how much you rise. But I also think it's an invitation to remember that we must allow others to rise in our presence too. And though it was written in response to a specific cultural African American experience, like all poetry, it articulates universal truth. If a poem's going to last, it's got to say something important, right? The refrain of "Still I Rise" is the heartbeat of truth, proclaiming that there is within each of us something that is unstoppable, inexhaustible, inextinguishable, and unchangeable. That which we call God, Spirit itself, divine intelligence, that in which we live, move, and have our being, that which rises in us as us, can never be oppressed. Life rises as us always. Maya writes, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moon and like stars with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Do you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Maya Angelou. But in spite of the discomfort and obstacles, we shall all persevere and rise. Perhaps what is in the way is actually the way, and that we rise not in spite of our challenges and discomforts, but because of them. There is that within us that continues to call us forward and upward on our journey of awakening. In closing, let me remind you that you are well and wondrously made by the divine intelligence and creativity back of all. Despite the appearance or experience of obstacles and adversity, the way of life is always rising, expanding, and evolving. Every part of your journey is useful and necessary for that which Spirit wants to express as you. Nothing is wasted. All is good. And as you rise up into a life that works, Spirit uses you to help others rise. That's how we create a world that works for all. So thank you for being a part of my rising and allowing me to be a part of each of yours this morning. I want to close with a one-sentence affirmation for all of us. Please read this with me. I have faith that Spirit is using all my life circumstances as I rise to my highest and best. Thank you so much, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you.